The judge thought humiliating Karoline Leavitt in court would be easy, but just seconds later, the entire room was left stunned by what she did next. The air hung heavy in courtroom 12B of Westfield County Courthouse. Morning light filtered through tall windows, casting rectangles of brightness across the polished mahogany floor. The courtroom had reached capacity 30 minutes before proceedings began, testament to the high-profile Maxwell Industries case. Karoline Leavitt stood at the defense table, arranging manila folders containing evidence that had consumed her nights and weekends for months. Her navy blazer sleeves touched the edge of her wrists as she moved. Beneath the table, her foot tapped a silent rhythm against the floor, the only sign of her nerves. At 34, Karoline was younger than most attorneys handling cases of this magnitude. Her client, an environmental nonprofit, faced bankruptcy if they lost against Maxwell Industries, a corporate giant whose waste management had allegedly contaminated groundwater in 3 communities. "All rise," called the bailiff, his voice resonating through the hushed room. As Judge Eleanor Brenner entered, Karoline felt the shift in energy. At 62, Judge Brenner had earned a reputation for her brilliant legal mind and merciless temperament. Her silver hair loose on her shoulders, highlighting sharp cheekbones and penetrating gray eyes. Her black robe swayed as she moved toward the bench. "Be seated," she commanded, her voice crystalline and authoritative. Karoline remained standing, her spine straight despite the knot between her shoulder blades. Her opposing counsel, Richard Tanner, stood as well, a seasoned litigator in an expensive charcoal suit. "Your Honor," Karoline began, "the defense would like to—" "Ms. Leavitt," Judge Brenner cut in, "I see you're eager as ever to waste the court's time." The remark landed like a physical blow. Karoline felt heat rise from her neck to her cheeks. She was aware of the courtroom's collective intake of breath. "Your Honor," Karoline began, "the defense would like to—" "Ms. Leavitt," Judge Brenner cut in, her steel gray eyes narrowing, "I see you're as eager as ever to waste the court's time." The remark landed like a physical blow. Karoline felt heat rise from her neck to her cheeks, the flush spreading until it reached the roots of her chestnut hair. She was aware of the courtroom's collective intake of breath, of the slight shifting of bodies as spectators leaned forward in their seats. "Your Honor, I'm simply attempting to—" "What you're attempting to do, Ms. Leavitt, is drag out these proceedings with theatrical flourishes that might impress your inexperienced colleagues, but do nothing to serve justice." Her voice carried a hint of amusement now, as though she found Karoline's efforts not just inadequate, but entertaining. "I've read your motion, and frankly, I'm surprised someone with your limited experience would propose such a novel interpretation of the statutes in question." The silence that followed was deafening. Karoline could feel the weight of 100 eyes on her back, could practically hear the scratching of reporters' pens. Her throat constricted as she struggled to maintain her composure. What Judge Brenner didn't know, what few people in the courtroom knew, was that Karoline Leavitt had sacrificed everything for this case. The endless nights poring over environmental data, the weekends spent interviewing affected families, the relationships that had withered under the weight of her commitment. She hadn't taken this case for glory or career advancement. She had taken it because she believed in justice. The leather of her portfolio felt cool beneath her fingertips as she opened it with deliberate slowness. The courtroom seemed to hold its collective breath as she retrieved a single sheet of paper. "Your Honor," she said, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart, "with all due respect, my experience is not on trial today. The facts are—" She raised her chin slightly, meeting the judge's gaze directly. "And the facts show that Maxwell Industries knowingly discharged chemical waste into the soil for 15 years, in direct violation of the Clean Water Act." Judge Brenner's expression darkened, the lines around her mouth deepening into crevices. "Ms. Leavitt, are you presuming to lecture this court on environmental law?" "No, Your Honor," she replied, her voice gaining strength with each word. "I'm simply presenting the evidence as it exists, and that evidence is irrefutable." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Karoline could sense her client, Dr. Helen Torres, shift nervously in her seat behind the defense table. But Karoline kept her eyes fixed on Judge Brenner, watching as irritation gave way to something else. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps grudging respect. "Proceed," she said finally, leaning back in her high-backed leather chair, with an expression that suggested she expected to be disappointed. For the next 3 hours, Karoline methodically presented her case. Each argument was backed by scientific data, by testimony from environmental experts, by internal company documents that Maxwell's legal team had fought desperately to keep sealed. She spoke with quiet intensity, her voice never rising yet somehow filling every corner of the high-ceiling room. Throughout her presentation, Judge Brenner interrupted repeatedly, her questions sharp as razors and twice as cutting. Each time, Karoline responded with measured precision, refusing to be rattled by the judge's tone or intimidated by her reputation. "And so, Your Honor," she concluded as afternoon light cast long shadows across the courtroom floor, "based on the evidence presented, we ask the court to find in favor of the plaintiffs and order Maxwell Industries to cease operations at the Westfield facility until proper environmental remediation can be completed." Judge Brenner's expression remained unreadable as she surveyed the courtroom. The tension was palpable, a living thing that seemed to occupy the space between the defense and prosecution tables. "Mr. Tanner," she said finally, turning to Maxwell's attorney, "do you have anything to add before I render my decision?" Please like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you think about the video. Richard Tanner rose slowly, his confidence visibly shaken. "Your Honor, Ms. Leavitt's interpretation of the data is creative, but ultimately flawed. The alleged contamination could have come from numerous sources, and the timeline she's presented doesn't align with—" "Mr. Tanner," Judge Brenner interrupted, removing her reading glasses and placing them carefully on the bench before her. "I've listened carefully to both sides today. I've reviewed the evidence, and I've come to a conclusion that I believe serves the interests of justice." Karoline felt her heart rate accelerate, the blood rushing in her ears, nearly drowning out the judge's next words. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiffs." The courtroom erupted, gasps, exclamations, chairs scraping as people rose. Behind Karoline, Dr. Torres let out a sound between a sob and laugh. As the bailiff called for order, Karoline remained still, her gaze locked with Judge Brenner's. The older woman's expression had changed completely. Gone was the dismissive contempt, replaced by something like admiration. "Ms. Leavitt," she said, her voice cutting through the din, "approach the bench." With unsteady legs, Karoline walked forward. The judge leaned down, her words for Karoline alone. "I've been on this bench 25 years. I've seen brilliance and mediocrity in equal measure. What I saw today was something rarer: conviction. You believed in your case and made me believe it too. That's the mark of an exceptional attorney." Karoline blinked back tears. "Thank you, Your Honor." "Don't thank me," she replied, her gruffness returning. "Just keep doing what you did today. The law needs advocates who care about justice more than winning." As Karoline turned to rejoin her ecstatic client, she caught sight of the packed courtroom, the reporters rushing for the doors, the citizens of Westfield embracing each other with tears streaming down their faces. Even Richard Tanner nodding slightly in acknowledgement of her victory. The weight of the moment settled over the room, heavier than any ruling that had come before it. Today was about something far greater, the undeniable truth that respect isn't granted on demand, nor stripped away by arrogance. It's earned, battle by battle, moment by moment. And today, Karoline Leavitt had claimed it, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been underestimated.